I think it's very unfair when a political opponent, is prosecuted by the DOJ, by Biden's DOJ. So they're losing in every poll. They're losing in almost every demographic. And I think they feel this is the way they're going to try and win. And that's not the way it goes. That'll be bedlam in the country. It's a very bad thing. It's a very bad precedent. As we said, it's the opening of a Pandora's box, and it's a very sad thing that's happened with this whole situation. And we think we had a very good day today. The concession of these two major points was pretty amazing, and honestly, I'm very glad they did it. I think they did the right thing. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, you just used the word bedlam. Will you tell your supporters now, no matter what, no violence?
What's up, everybody? Major Retired Richard Ojeda here, and the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals heard arguments on Tuesday in Donald Trump's federal 2020 election subversion case. His legal team presented the case that Donald's charges should be dismissed based on his claims of presidential immunity.
When they talk about threat to democracy, that's your real threat to democracy. And I feel that as a president, you have to have immunity. Very simple. And if you don't, as an example, if this case were lost on immunity, and I did nothing wrong, absolutely nothing wrong.
Prosecutors working for Jack Smith have already charged former President Donald Trump with 4 counts related to his 2020 election scheme. Donald and his legal team are now trying to say that he shouldn't be held accountable for his actions now because he has already been impeached for his crimes and acquitted by the Senate.
I want to play you something Mr. Trump has been saying lately and repeated over the weekend about those convicted and serving time for their crimes on January 6.
They ought to release the J6 hostages. They've suffered enough. They ought to release them. I call them hostages. Some people call them prisoners. I call them hostages. Release the J6 hostages, Joe. Release them, Joe. You can do it real easy, Joe.
They're not hostages, and he knows that. He's certainly done this before, trying to turn convicted violent felons into martyrs. As we mentioned, the former president's lawyers, they're going to argue tomorrow that his actions after the 2020 election were all covered by presidential immunity. How do you think this is going to play out?
I don't think it's going to play out very well for the former president tomorrow. I think one of the basic guidelines I always had in watching arguments of any sort in court, and particularly appellate arguments, is the side that gets the most questions is probably the one going to get the short end of the stick in the ruling at the end. And I anticipate that most of the questions are going to be directed at Trump and his lawyers on how you can possibly justify giving a president who is sworn to uphold the laws of the United States and the Constitution of the United States, how that person can be above the law, and anything can be lawful just because the president says so.
His team tried to argue that this would be a double jeopardy situation, but the judges were highly skeptical about the outlandish claims. Remember that Donald's legal team argued that the things he said to incite the January 6 attackers was free speech and should be defended. They argued that Donald Trump is exempt from being held accountable for inciting a mob that killed a police officer and caused mayhem on Capitol Hill. The Trump legal team has made excuse after excuse trying to cover up for Donald's criminal behavior. This whole notion that Donald Trump is the victim of persecution is absolutely ridiculous. Donald knows he's guilty, but he's attempting to incorporate his legal problems into his campaign platform. Every time he shows up in court and blames Joe Biden for his problems, he raises money. He is running a con, and unfortunately, his undereducated followers fall for it. In recent campaign ads, Trump pitches the claim to supporters saying that Joe Biden is forcing him into the courtroom, distracting him from his presidential campaign. That in itself is a lie. Donald Trump went to this appeal voluntarily. He's trying to capitalize off of his legal problems and get his supporters to send him money. This blind allegiance is what Donald Trump is hoping for when he tries to sell his latest con. This is why Donald loves the undereducated. They understand him on a third grade level and act the same way. The fact that the judges that were presiding over this case are highly skeptical of the Trump legal team's claims says a lot. This is not the first time that the Trump team has tried to stretch the truth. What seems to be the most troubling thing to come out of this political stunt is Donald's promise of bedlam if he is indeed held accountable for his crimes. He made a cryptic statement about opening Pandora's box if he's convicted. Donald wouldn't follow up on his claims of bedlam. Instead, he ignored the question and walked away. Donald Trump did not have to be at this appeals hearing. He is trying to play the victim and the hero at the same time. His claims of political persecution are nonsense. Donald Trump is not above the law. He is a criminal that must be held accountable. His legal team is grasping at straws, and that is an absolute fact. Sappers clear the way, airborne all the way.